So with all that said, now I'm going to introduce Tara O'Hare from the EPA to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maddie. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tara O'Hare. I've been working for the EPA for about 20 years now, and 16 of which have been on the WaterSense program, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. So I'm excited to talk to you all about this. So this is part of a Waters Wednesday series that we're holding, and we have the next webinar that's coming up will be kind of the opposite of this one about capital improvement projects. So that'll be happening in April, and you can use the link at the bottom to register. So just to give you some context for why we're talking about this, every gallon of water that's used has an energy footprint and vice versa. Energy is needed to pump, move, heat, and treat water throughout the water life cycle. And then because of this, saving water can actually save energy and vice versa. And water efficiency on its own can be part of your energy savings portfolio. 8% of commercial buildings' energy use is actually used to heat water, which is a pretty significant number. And because of this, anything that uses hot water or steam will have significant water and energy savings. Because of this, we encourage everybody to evaluate both water and energy efficiency together when you're considering doing a project to get the best return on your investment. So the WaterSense program is a voluntary program that was launched by EPA in 2006. And the whole point is to provide a simple way for both businesses and consumers to identify water efficient products, programs, practices, and homes. So the WaterSense label is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can find that on products that have been independently certified for water efficiency and performance. Back in the early 90s, when low flow products first hit the market, they didn't work very well. So because of that, each one of the specifications that WaterSense makes includes not just the water savings aspect, but also a performance requirement to make sure that it performs as well or better than the standard counterparts. So that's something when you're finding this label on a product, you can be confident that you're going to save water and get a product that works very well at the same time. So the WaterSense program has 8 different product labels, and they're found on more than 46,000 product models that have earned the label to date. So we have both an indoor suite of products and an outdoor suite. So we label flushing urinals, shower heads, both types of toilets, so flushometer valve in commercial impacts, and tank type toilets, which are found in residential or in private restrooms, such as like hotel guest rooms. We also label faucets. And then we have a couple of outdoor products. We have irrigation controllers. We have both weather-based controllers, which get data from a weather station nearby to determine if water is needed. And we also have soil moisture-based controllers, where there's a little sensor that actually sits in the ground and measures the actual water that's in the soil. And that will help determine if a cycle of irrigation can be skipped or not. And then we also have what are called spray sprinkler bodies. Those actually control the pressure within the sprinkler head and can actually save quite a bit of water if done correctly. And then we also have a labeled homes program, which is kind of separate. So we wanted to give you guys kind of a quick overview of how water is used in some basic types of commercial facilities. So we put together this kind of graphic for you guys to check out. And this includes hospitals, offices, schools, restaurants, and hospitality, which includes hotels, basically, and motels. So as you can see, there's a pretty standard blue bar on the bottom of the chart. And that actually represents the amount of water that's used for restrooms, which is about 30% of water use in most building types. So that's always a good target for water savings. Next, you'll see the red line, which is for mechanical systems such as cooling and heating. And that can be, depending on the facility type, it can be 10 to 20% of your water use, sometimes up to higher amounts in offices, for example. The next one is the green bar, and that is actually for landscaping water use. And that can be from 5 to 30% of water use within a facility. So it's another good target. And the other two sections are on commercial kitchens, which are obviously a big thing for restaurants, as well as medical equipment and pools and spas. So the real way to tell how water is being used in your facility is to do a water assessment. And we do a whole other webinar about how to do water assessments. So I encourage you guys to check that one out if you're interested in how to figure out how much water is being used where in your facility. Or you can check out our resources as well. So today's focus is on quick wins. So I wanted to just define what that means, and so that you kind of have a sense of where I'm going with some of this information. So quick wins are things that are low level of effort and don't require heavy capital expenditure budget to do. It often includes changes to operation and maintenance practices or low cost retrofits or replacements. We'll talk a little bit about some moderate scale projects, but for the most part, those are something that's done over a larger, with a larger budget. And if you get into the large scale projects, those are capital expenditures where you're replacing big pieces of equipment, doing renovations, or actually creating new spaces within a facility. So we're mostly going to focus on quick wins today. The next month's webinar is on the capital expenditures portion, so I encourage you to check that out. It's kind of a sister webinar to this if you're interested in learning more about it. So one thing to keep in mind with all of this is that the cost of water is deceptively low. When you're just looking at the water rate, you're missing half of it or more. Facilities actually pay for water twice. They pay for water as it comes into the facility, as it's water supplied, and then they pay the wastewater or sewer cost as the water is being discharged to the sewer. And this doesn't include the cost of energy that's needed to pump and heat the water in the building. So when you're looking at the true cost of water, you want to include both the water rate and the sewer rate, as well as any other associated fees or costs that are associated with energy, detergent, chemical costs, or equipment maintenance. These are all some big components that you may miss if you're not looking at the whole picture. So one thing to keep in mind is that water using products, plumbing products especially, are notoriously leaky because of just the way that the components are made. There are physical components in the actual fixtures that break down over time, whether those are valves, flappers, gaskets, and when they break, they don't always stop the water from flowing. In the energy world, if there's a break in the circuit, it just shuts off the piece of equipment or fixture. But that doesn't always happen in the water world. So it's really important to keep an eye on your water use and verify at the end use to make sure that it will actually be saving water. So this leaking and continuously running water has no added value for your facility. So it's a really good target for water efficiency and water savings. So one thing we encourage people to do is to just add water to the efforts that they're already doing. A lot of you have been measuring your energy efficiency and working on that for many years now, and we encourage you to kind of just include water in some of the things that you're doing. So whether that's your operation and maintenance procedures or your procurement policies, a lot of you specify Energy Star products in a lot of what you do. So you can do the same thing with WaterSense labeled products. We also encourage you guys to include water efficiency in your subcontracts and service contracts. Some of your vendors may not necessarily be aware of your goals or know what you're trying to accomplish. So sometimes it just, you just have to call it out in the actual agreement, and then you can work with them over time to figure out what that actually means. So whether that's adding best practices to your operation and maintenance contracts, or doing a whole system audit with leak detection and repair. There's a lot of ways you can go with it, but it's important to kind of keep those vendors in the loop because they are your allies and can help you save water overall. You can also track water in Portfolio Manager. There's a tab to the right of the Energy tab, and you can actually track your water use that way as well as tracking your energy use. And then we also encourage you guys to check for rebates. Every water utility and wastewater utility is different. So we encourage you guys to contact them, but also your energy and gas utilities, because they often give rebates for water using products because there's so much energy involved in the use of it. So we just encourage you to check all of those things out when you're doing a project, because there may be some money that you can get in a rebate. So another thing to keep in mind is that you want to review all of your bills for accuracy. In a lot of cases, bills go to a completely separate department. They go to the account payable department or the accounting department. They don't go to the facility manager or the person that's actually doing the water work. So you want to kind of check to make sure that you're actually getting the correct rate class in your, you're being categorized correctly, and that your water meter size is correct on the bill. And then you can actually work with your utility to correct problems if you find them. Another thing to consider is if you have a whole lot of bills, you may want to consider hiring a bill review service, because they'll actually audit your bills from previous years, and they get paid based on a percentage of the savings that they achieve from their efforts. So you don't necessarily have to pay for it up front. It can kind of come from the savings that you are achieving. There's also some possible credits that you may want to consider. Sometimes if you can prove that the water hasn't gone down the sewer, you can get what's called a sewer credit. And this basically is, recognizing that water used in irrigation and cooling towers often gets evaporated and doesn't, or it, infiltrates into the soil. It's not going into the sewer system. So this is just kind of a recognition of that, and you can get a reduction on your sewer charges. Sometimes they also do leak adjustments, where if you get kind of a partial credit if you find the leak and report to the facility that you found it and fixed it. They'll often give you a partial credit for some of that water use. So leaks are pretty significant in, they're actually about 6% of water use. So they're alone something really important to check out. And the whole point of doing that is to kind of stop it in its tracks and make sure that you don't get to the point where you have property damage, like in the picture. So you want to look for any spikes in your water usage, either on your monthly bill tracking or in meter reading. And then you want to look for any problems or malfunctions when you're doing a water assessment or an inventory of your equipment. You can also get leaks from leak detection or failure abatement devices. They're often set up to send a text message or a phone call or an email to someone to let someone know that there's a problem. You can also find things during a walkthrough of a facility, whether that includes finding like puddles, dripping water, running fixtures, discharge to floor drains that you don't expect. Sometimes people just assume because there's a drain there that it's okay and it's fine, but it could actually be something leaking significantly and is a problem. So you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that as well. And then honestly, your employees and visitors or tenants are your eyes and ears on the ground, because you can't be everywhere. It's not realistic. So you really want to kind of give them easy ways to report an issue so that it can be fixed quickly. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an impression of what the magnitude is that I'm talking about. So we put together this chart. Actually, Washington State put together this chart. And this is really just to show you at a certain size hole in a pipe and what that actually equals to in water savings if you fix it. So you can see it starts kind of small, but it still adds up to about $500 per year in water use. And then as you get to a larger hole in the pipe, it's actually quite a bit more, almost $30,000 per year. And so it's really something significant to pay attention to. We also wanted to give you some context about what when we're talking about gallons of water per minute. What does that look like? So on the left side, the picture there is what 1 gallon a minute looks like. Basically, it's kind of a trickling flow out of a garden hose. But in the other side, on the right, that's a garden hose at full flow, and that's about 6 gallons per minute, or $33,000 a year worth of water use on average. So it's important if you can, stop water that's going through once through a piece of equipment, or if there's a leak, it's important to fix that as soon as possible because it does add up quickly. So we also put together this chart to give you some more examples. I won't read it, but it basically, if you have a leaky toilet, it can be significant. But things like an unattended water hose or a broken distribution line can be really significant because it is so much water that's being used. And even a stuck float valve in a cooling tower is also quite a bit of water use, almost $30,000 per year. So the name of the game is leaks add up quickly, and you want to repair them as fast as possible. So another thing you can do is not wait for the bill to find out if there's a problem. You can actually submeter specific end uses for on-demand data. One thing to keep in mind is, unlike the energy world, water submeters don't require a separate utility account. They can just be for your internal use only. And you can consider temporary flow meters and other water monitoring devices, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a lot of options out there. And you can set up alerts so that you can quickly identify problems and fix them. We generally recommend that you submeter any system that's using more than 1,000 gallons per day or 100,000 gallons per year. So that's things like tenant spaces, irrigation systems, cooling towers, single pass cooling, and rainwater systems. So the world of water devices has really exploded in the past few years. So there's a lot of options out there, and you really need to figure out what features you actually want and need and how much you're willing to pay. So leak detection devices are specifically used for detecting leaks themselves in the fixtures. They can be a more expensive option than submeters, but they can do a lot of things for you, like 24/7 monitoring or automatic shutoff as well. So it's something to consider. We'll go through some of the types of them in a second, and there's just a really good way to figure out if there's a problem in your facility. And they can be system-wide or they can be specific to certain fixtures. So there are a lot of options out there. So here are a few of them just to kind of show you what the landscape looks like. So one of the ones on the left side is an inline flow sensor, and that you have to install in the pipe run. And basically what it does is it senses the amount of water that's coming through, and if it detects a significant spike in the water use, it can actually shut it off and send you an alert. The surface leak sensors are a lot more basic. They are actually just little sensors that you put on the floor around a piece of equipment, or, like you can do it at home with your washing machine. And basically what it does is detects the presence of water in a place where it's not supposed to be. And it can be used with multiple sensors, and sometimes it can be used with an auto shutoff valve to shut the water off if there's a problem. There's also non-invasive leak detectors, and these are temporary flow meters and acoustic detection devices. An acoustic detection device is really one that uses sound waves to determine how much water is going past that particular part of the pipe. So they're used to identify leaks in specific areas, but they don't always provide 24/7 monitoring. So, but they can be moved around. So you can put them, you just kind of strap it onto the outside of the pipe and let it run. And it can actually be moved to a different location throughout your facility whenever you want to. So it can be a good option if you want to spot check things, like spot check, a couple of restrooms, or you want to look at your cooling tower. It can be really helpful that way. Yeah. So an effective leak detection system kind of combines all of these things. If you can use the flow sensors and the surface sensor leak sensors, that can be helpful. Having some way to shut off the water when it's detecting a problem can be helpful, can be annoying. So you have to kind of pay attention to what, if that's actually something you want, or if you just want an alert of some kind. So there are many options that are out there. And I encourage you guys to kind of just check out what features are, looking interesting to you, and kind of look at your budget and see what fits. WaterSense doesn't currently label leak detection or water monitoring devices, but it is something that we're considering doing in the future. Water monitoring services also exist. They're companies that kind of package everything together so that they'll monitor your water use over time and give you analytics on the end uses and trends. They also can provide real-time monitoring and alerts, and you can look at dashboards of how to monitor a building or your entire portfolio of buildings if you want to. So it's another thing to consider within your strategies. Another thing, as I mentioned before, is to involve your employees as much as you can. You really want to train your custodial staff to identify leaks and tell them how to report them. So you can post signs. We've just pulled this one off the internet as an example, where you kind of give them some sort of a factoid of why it's important to save water, and then give them the contact information to report it. And you can put those in restrooms or kitchen areas, just to remind your employees and visitors how to actually report a problem so it can be fixed. Another thing you can do is there are different roles. You can add some specific tasks to existing routines, because right now you have a whole bunch of routines that are happening in your facility all day, and you can add some things to those to kind of check the water use that's happening, and if there are problems, to identify them faster. So facility managers and property managers often do walkarounds where they are just, walking around the property and looking at things. One thing you can add to that is to just check the meter during off hours, or when you think that there shouldn't be much activity in the building. And if the water meter is still moving, you could have a leak. Another thing, as I mentioned before, is to look for running water that's going to floor drains near equipment, because that running water could be a leak or another problem. With housekeeping and cleaning staff, you can give them a simple way to report dripping faucets or clogged faucets and shower heads. With tank type toilets, you can actually see if there's a leak in the toilet flapper, if there's a small ripple of water at the edge of the bowl. And that can be an indicator that the flapper needs to be replaced. You can also help your landscaping staff or contractors if they're out there and they see puddles or water on hardscape like sidewalks or the pavement. Those are indicators of waste. You can also look for broken sprinkler heads, dead plants, and other strange looking things, because they could be indicators of a water leak or just a broken irrigation system. For example, with the dead plants, they're not getting enough water. With kitchen staff, we encourage you to shut off equipment between uses, especially food disposals. Food disposals can be 10 to 15 gallons per minute and are really water intensive. So they're a good target, if you're not using it, to put it in standby mode. We also want you to check for leaks in your steam equipment, because that's wasted energy and water. So now I'm going to get into some specifics of, certain areas of your facility, those top 3 that we talked about in the chart at the beginning, to give you some tips and tricks to take a look at. So restrooms are one of the biggest ones, as I mentioned at the beginning. They can account for up to 40% of your water use. And if you have fixtures that were installed before 1994, they actually use 3 to 5 times more water than the newer efficient models on the market today. And because of the way that these fixtures are used, it's important to look at user behavior as well as just the fixture themselves. And in the case of a lot of things, regular maintenance is vital. So we're going to talk about that as well. As I mentioned before, plumbing products are notoriously leaky. So there's a couple of tricks you can use to actually verify the water use and find out if there's a problem. One of the easy ones is on tank type toilets that you find in homes and hotel guest rooms. You actually can just drop a dye tablet or some food coloring in the tank and wait about 10 minutes. And if there's dye in the bowl, then you have a leaky toilet flapper that needs to be replaced. With flushometer valve toilets and flushing urinals, you have to time the flush of the whole flush cycle. And you can actually just count the number of seconds that it takes to go through the whole cycle, and you can figure out if that's an appropriate amount of water for that fixture. So 4 seconds is generally about 1.6 gallons per minute. whereas 3 seconds is 1.28 gallons per minute. So it's just something to keep an eye on to make sure that it's flushing properly. You can also check faucets and shower heads using a timed flow test, where you can use a flow gauge bag, which is in the picture on the right, or you can actually just use a measuring cup. And you just, time the flow and how long it takes to fill up that thing. And then you know exactly how much water is coming out per minute. So these are some simple ways. We got this from a really great guide from the South Florida Water Management District that goes through how to actually conduct your own audit at a facility. So if you're interested in learning more things like that, I'd encourage you to check that resource out because it's really helpful. So some of the things you can do for general restroom maintenance are to test the water pressure serving each floor of your building, because it may not be within the optimal range. And if it's not, then your fixtures are going to work improperly and you're going to have water waste. So the optimal pressure is between 20 and 60 pounds per square inch. And you can just test that at each floor to make sure that that set of fixtures is getting the right amount of water pressure. We encourage you to inspect valves annually and replace any worn parts. And you want to, if you have automatic sensors on any fixtures, you want to look at them and inspect them on a regular basis and calibrate them as directed by the manufacturer. So you want to avoid double flushes or phantom flushes, which is when a toilet flushes when no one's there. And you want to avoid faucets running longer than necessary. So it's important to check those if you have them. If you have aerators or sensors, you want to check for tampering. Sometimes users get really angry about it and can disable the sensor, remove the aerator, or damage the fixture. So it's something to keep an eye out for as well. And then when you have shower heads and faucets, you want to regularly remove any scale buildup from the hard water and any biofilm that's on the fixtures. So those are just some key maintenance pieces for you. As I mentioned a minute ago, one thing to keep in mind is that automatic sensors on fixtures don't save water on their own, especially if they're not being maintained properly. So the malfunctioning sensors can obviously have faucets that run longer or cut off too early, and forcing users to use an extra cycle of water use, or the toilets and urinals can be flushing unnecessarily. So you really want to calibrate them regularly using the instructions from the manufacturer, and that will help to make sure that it's actually performing as expected. Some other things to do for quick, cheap things is to replace any leaky toilet flappers. They waste about 30 gallons a day, or 3,900 gallons per month. And most of the flappers are $4 to $9 each. So they're a really cheap retrofit that you can find even at Home Depot. You just have to make sure you match the type of flapper to the new one to make sure that it's the correct type of flapper. You also may want to consider installing WaterSense labeled aerators or laminar flow devices. They're about $5 to $10 each, and they just go on the end of the faucet, and they actually save quite a bit of water. And I'll explain what those are in a minute. You can also replace inefficient shower heads so that you get consistent spray force and spray coverage, and you can look for the WaterSense label for that as well. And in the longer term, you want to replace older toilets and other fixtures that were installed before 1994 with WaterSense labeled models. And then, as I mentioned, you want to check all of your utilities for rebates and other savings programs that are out there. So I just mentioned faucet aerators, and I've got the question a few times on webinars, what is a faucet aerator? So I wanted to just show you some examples so you understand what it is. So basically it's a little piece of pipe with a screen on it that goes at the end of the faucet where the water comes out. So you screw it out, you can screw it on, or you can take it off as well. But so basically it's a really quick retrofit that you can do, and it actually saves a ton of water because that's what controls the amount of water pressure that comes out of the fixture. and they cost about $5 to $10, so they're really cheap retrofits that can save quite a bit. So the standard aerator is the one that you see on the left-hand side. It's got kind of a cloudy appearance because there's air in the actual water stream. And these are used more for private use faucets, where you would find them in your house, as well as, you know, a hotel room or a multifamily building. Then there's also what's called a spray aerator, which is in the middle, and it looks like a mini shower stream. And you can see it's like little streams of water. And these are used in public restrooms in commercial buildings. So you'll see those in all sorts of types of commercial buildings. And it has kind of a clear stream for it as well. And then on the right side is what's called a laminar flow device, and the water is very clear and does not contain air. So this is for use in high flow applications or healthcare facilities. So if you're in that type of building, look for a laminar flow device to save some water at your faucet. So this is just a chart of all of the water levels for WaterSense labeled products. One thing I will just draw your attention to is that we do not label public use faucets like the ones that are found in commercial buildings. The national standard for those is already very low, so there's no need for additional water savings on top of that. So if you're looking to replace a fixture, we encourage you guys to look for the WaterSense label, because you can be confident that you'll get something that saves water and performs just as well. So next we're going to talk about mechanical systems a little bit. Mechanical systems can account for 30% of your water use or more, and this is for heating and cooling. So this is a really good system to consider submetering so that you can check it often for leaks and inefficiencies, especially if there's hot water or steam involved. Those can be really important areas of water and energy savings. So some of the main things you can do is minimize the water used in single pass cooling systems, which I'll explain in a minute, and maximize your cooling tower cycles of concentration, which I'll also explain. So single pass cooling is, or once through cooling, basically is where water runs through a fixture or a piece of equipment to remove some heat and cool it down, and it just sends the water through one time and then discharges it to the sewer. And this actually uses about 40 times more water than a cooling tower to remove the same heat load. So some types of equipment that could be using single pass cooling are things like ice machines, refrigeration systems, vacuum systems, air conditioners, and air compressors. So this is something that you want to eliminate whenever possible. So if you can't eliminate it, you want to maximize the efficiency of your system by using the minimum flow rate required by the manufacturer. And you want to install a control valve in it to turn off the water when there's no heat, so that you're putting it in standby mode. And once you have that valve installed, you want to check its operation regularly, because that is something that can stop working, and you may think the system is on standby when it's not. Another thing you can do is recirculate the water by connecting it to existing chilled water loops, if that's possible. Sometimes that depends on the distance between the piece of equipment and the chilled water loop and some other logistical factors. In the long run, you want to eliminate single pass cooling as much as you possibly can, because it is such a huge waste. And you want to replace it with air-cooled equipment. A lot of those are Energy Star labeled, so that's something to look for. And you can also reuse water in a closed loop recirculating system if you find that that makes sense for your facility. So cooling towers can be really significant. Not every building has them, but if it does, it can be 20 to 50% of your total water use. And it's a really high energy using area because water is pumped through the system continuously. And one thing to keep in mind is that the whole point of a cooling tower is to evaporate the water to remove the heat load. So we're not targeting evaporation for water savings. We want that to happen. So we don't want to target that in our water savings efforts. You can monitor water chemistry and flow and maximize cycles of concentration. So cycles of concentration is an indicator of the number of times that water can be recirculated in the system before it's discharged to the sewer. So it's often limited by the actual concentration of minerals in the water, and it can be measured by a conductivity meter. If there's too much minerals building up in the water, it can lead to scaling and mineral buildup, which can wreck the system and cause a lot of damage, which the cooling towers are not cheap. They're significant cost expenditure, so you want to make sure that it's in a very ideal operating conditions. So one thing to keep in mind is that increasing the cycles of concentration from 3 to 6 reduces the water that's needed to replenish the system by 20% and the water that's sent down the sewer by 50%. So it can be a really easy way to really save a lot of water in your system. Basically the water that's full of minerals is sent down the sewer, that's called blowdown, and then water is added to the system to make up for that water that was removed. So you want to install submeters on both the makeup and blowdown lines of your equipment to monitor how much flow is happening. And this can help ensure also that the fill valves cut off cleanly, so they're not just trickling when they should be off. Most of these systems have a water treatment vendor that really helps to keep the system in order. So you want to talk to them about why you want to save water and make it part of your the work that they're doing. Oftentimes they'll leave a report when they do a visit, and you can actually take this report and read it to look at the progress towards your goals. So if you're trying to move from water being used 3 times to water being used 6 times, you want to make sure that that's actually happening and that you're getting those savings as you expect. And then another thing to consider is the possible sewer credit that I mentioned before, if you can measure how much water is evaporating and not going into the sewer. So another area of water use that's important to check out is your outdoor water use, because it can be 20 to 30% of a building's water use. And the whole name of this game here is to minimize the amount of water that's needed to supplement rainwater to meet the plant's watering needs. So a lot of times it will depend on the climate of your area and the amount of rainfall that you would expect. So you need to keep the plants alive, and you want to just minimize the amount of extra water you have to add beyond rainwater. So in many cases, there's a landscape or irrigation service agreement in place. So this is another place to work with the vendor or the contractor to tell them that you want to save water and work towards those goals. And then you want to make sure that any of those contracts include a requirement to follow local watering restrictions. When there is a drought, watering restrictions are often the first thing that happen on outdoor water use, and it's very easy to police by the utility. So it's something that you want to make sure you're following those requirements and that you're not, watering when you're not supposed to be. If you have existing staff that do the work in-house, there's a lot of courses and seminars that they can attend to learn more about water efficient techniques, and they can actually get certified as well. So it's something to consider if you're doing it in-house. So in your operation and maintenance of your landscape, you really want to protect your investment in plants. You paid a lot of water for them, a lot of money for them. So you want to make sure that they're healthy and, living as expected. So one thing to keep in mind is that overwatering causes more damage to plants than underwatering. And when you overwater, it can also cause damage to building foundations. So it's important to be watering just as much as you really need to and no more. You want to remove weeds from the area so that the water is available for the plants that you want there. And if you are mowing it, you want to raise the blade on that to allow turf grass to grow longer. Growing longer promotes deeper root growth, which will be a healthier, more resilient plant over time. If you can incorporate shade into your planting, you can actually apply less water to the shady areas. So that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to reduce your water use. And you want to minimize water that's used for other purposes. Shut off water features whenever you can. Recirculate the water that's used in them. And you want to sweep the hard surfaces, not use water or water brooms to remove dirt and other issues. Irrigation is a difficult area. There's a lot of water that's lost. About 50% of water that's used outdoors is often wasted because of inefficient, systems, or from wind evaporation or overwatering. So this happens because of poor system design, improper installation and management, lack of maintenance, and improper scheduling. So some things you can do to look for water waste is to go check for broken or clogged sprinkler heads. A broken sprinkler head will often look like the picture on the right, which we call a geyser. And that's a whole bunch of water coming out of it because the sprinkler head is broken. There's also like leaks in actual pipes, that's like a picture in the middle. And those are important to check for as well. Sometimes they can be underground. So if you see an area where the ground is kind of lower than other places, that may be an area where there's a leak underneath it. So that's an indicator to check to see if there's a problem in the system. You want to make sure sprinkler heads don't tilt too high or too low, that they're actually watering the plants that you're expecting them to. And you want to avoid watering pavement. Pavement and hardscape doesn't grow, so there's no need to water it. You also want to look for pooling and puddling in the system, because those are indicators of overwatering and other issues. So one thing that you can do is to audit your system using an irrigation professional certified by a WaterSense labeled program every 3 years. So WaterSense creates a test basically and a program for how to train the irrigation professionals. And once the irrigation professional goes through the training and they take the test, they've then proven that they have water efficiency knowledge, and they get on our list of certified professionals. So you can check out our list. They're all over the country, and they do both residential and commercial water use or systems. So you can check them out if you'd like to do an irrigation audit. And like I said, it's important to do those every 3 years if you can. Another thing to consider is to update the irrigation schedules regularly and make sure that you're scheduling each zone separately. The plants in each zone are often different, and so the watering needs are different. And you want to make sure that you're watering appropriately for those plants in that area. You can also install and monitor submeters to indicate if there are any leaks or inefficiencies in the system. And with irrigation controllers, if you have a traditional manual controller or a clock timer, you want to replace that with a WaterSense labeled controller. Those are just really out of date, and it's difficult to keep on top of changing the schedules. So just getting one that's a weather-based controller or a soil moisture sense-based controller can be really helpful. And make sure that there's a rain shut-off device or a sensor in your system so that if it's raining, it doesn't actually water the plants. You want to check the pressure in your irrigation system. If it's too high or inconsistent, it'll waste a lot of water. So you can install a WaterSense labeled spray sprinkler body to maintain constant pressure and flow. And that really helps if there's an issue in the system. Finally, the last area I'm going to talk about today is commercial kitchens. One of the main things to do in a commercial kitchen is to turn off the equipment or turn it down during slow times or when not in use. And consider installing automatic shutoff valves, because they can be helpful to do that. And you want to check the actual valves often to make sure they're actually shutting the water off like they're supposed to. And you want to check any self-closing nozzles as well to make sure that they're stopping that water flow when you want it to, because that can break down over time and stop working. You also want to reduce your waste from any steam equipment. So you want to keep the doors and lids closed and replace any gaskets or tighten the hinges to create a good seal so that you retain that heat and steam where you want it to be. And finally, as I mentioned before, you want to minimize the use of a food disposal system or a garbage disposal. It can be 15 gallons per minute, which is a huge amount of water. And also, if you can't shut it off, you want to make sure that you're running cold water through the system. Sometimes they're plumbed for hot water, which is a total waste of energy and a lot of water at the same time. So that's something to keep in mind and to turn it off whenever you can. If there's a way to encourage your users to scrape the food waste into a composting bin, that can help quite a bit as well, because then you're not trying to remove all of that food waste with water, you're doing it manually. So there's a lot of WaterSense resources available to help you with all these areas and more. So on our website, we have a whole commercial tools and training section that has water information by facility type, our best practices guidebooks, and water saving tips and tools, worksheets and checklists. We have links to our training webinars and case studies as well. So I encourage you to check those out because there's a lot of information there. A couple of tools that I'll point you to get you started. We created a simple water assessment checklist that you can just print out and bring around the facility as you do a walkthrough, or it's a writable PDF if you want to do it on your computer. And that's best to kind of identify and target potential projects and best practices. So we also created a checklist for just operation and maintenance. So this doesn't include any retrofits or replacements of fixtures. It's just what you can do for operation and maintenance. So that's a lot of what we talked about today is on that checklist. So I encourage you to check that one out. Again, you can just print it out and bring it around with you, and it can help guide you along the way. We also have some sample worksheets that are in the appendix of our best practices guidebook, and those can help you kind of manage your water use overall. And then we have a really basic leaks checklist that just kind of identifies some potential areas of water waste. But all of those are actually on the operation and maintenance checklist, so I'd encourage you to check that one out especially. This is what it looks like. We go through different areas of the facility and provide some things to look for if you're in that area or looking at a particular fixture type. So it's a lot of the things we talked about today and a lot more. There's a lot of things you can do that don't require a big investment. So yeah, and then we also have our best practices guidebook called WaterSense at Work, and it includes a whole bunch of best practices for all the different areas of water use in your facility. So we're in the process of updating this right now. And so there's new ones on all the old ones posted on our website. So you can dig into those. It's done by equipment piece or fixture piece. So you can just look at the section that you're interested in. And, it goes through ways to operate and maintain that piece of equipment, as well as things to consider if you're going to retrofit or replace that piece of equipment. We also have some multifamily guides that are specific to multifamily buildings. A lot of the information is similar to what's in the best practices guidebook. So it's really just a simplified version for multifamily building owners. So I encourage you to check those out if you're interested. We don't expect that you're going to sit down and read the whole thing. It's written more as a, look at this, look at the toilets section and find out what you need to know about toilets kind of thing. So I've given you a whole bunch of information, but I just wanted to give you guys some things that you can do right now. You can check out our tools and trainings page. You can start collecting your water bills and identify existing meter locations. Sometimes you don't know where they are, so it's important to go through your facility and find out where they are and create a plan for how you're going to manage them. You also want to check out some areas or systems that you can submeter or use one of the water monitoring devices. And you want to actually educate your employees to look for and report leaks so that you can fix them as quickly as possible. And then finally, you can create a list of potential projects and contact your utilities to see if there are rebates or other incentives available. So finally, as I mentioned before, this is a series of webinars that we're doing with Energy Star. And the next one will be the opposite of this one. It'll be focused on capital improvement projects. So if you're interested, I encourage you to register using the link at the bottom of the slide. If you can't wait and you want to know what's, the information now, these are some links to the recordings of last year's series of webinars, so you can check those out. The information will be very similar this year, We're still in the process of planning the series, so just keep an eye out for those monthly training newsletters that come out from Energy Star, because it'll include all of the links to register for the water webinars as well. So that's it. And now we can get to some questions and answers if you have them. So let's see.